The Nevada desert stretched endlessly, a golden wasteland under a brutal midday sun. Heat shimmered off the cracked earth in rippling waves, and the wind carried grit that stung the eyes and scraped the skin. At the edge of a military training range, a small group of Marines clustered in tight, uneasy circles. They were seasoned, trained, and tough, but even they couldn't disguise the skepticism radiating through their stances. Whispers echoed across the dusty expanse. "She won't do it." "No way, that shot's impossible." "Did you see the wind? It's shifting again." Captain Alina Brooks stood apart from them, her small frame a stark contrast to the burly, battle-hardened Marines around her. Her uniform was immaculate, pressed and precise, her gloves a deep olive that matched the rifle she carried. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun, no loose strands to betray her focus. Her eyes, sharp, calculating, unflinching, scanned the horizon. At 1,500 yards, the target looked like a mere speck, barely visible against the brown desert terrain. The metal plate would ring like a bell if struck dead center, but even the most elite marksmen had failed. Alina had watched them try and fail countless times. "No one can make that shot," one of the instructors muttered with a derisive shake of his head. Alina didn't flinch. She didn't need to. She knelt, pressing her cheek against the stock of her rifle. Every muscle in her body tensed, every nerve alert. Her fingers traced the smooth metal, the familiar grooves of the bolt-action rifle, each detail burned into muscle memory from years of training. She inhaled slowly, then exhaled, feeling the desert wind bite at her face. Dust rolled along the ground in miniature tornadoes, carried by invisible currents. Around her, the other Marines watched, some out of curiosity, some out of incredulity. They had never seen anyone so calm in a situation where most would have faltered. Even the drone hovering above, recording for a military documentary, seemed to pause in the air, capturing a moment pregnant with tension. The wind shifted again, suddenly, violently, whipping grit across the range and threatening to blow the target plate off balance. A veteran sniper muttered under his breath, "No one ever done it with conditions like this." Alina adjusted her scope, her mind running through complex calculations with terrifying speed. Distance, wind speed, humidity, gravity, each variable accounted for, each possibility analyzed. Her heartbeat slowed, her breathing evened. In her mind, she visualized the trajectory of the bullet, its invisible arc, the fraction of an inch it would need to deviate to miss entirely. And then her thoughts drifted back. To her father. He had been a marksman too, a man whose pride was matched only by his precision. She remembered standing behind him in a hunting blind as a child, watching him line up his shots with a patience she couldn't understand. And then, one reckless afternoon, a careless shooter had taken her father's life, a tragic accident that would haunt her forever. It wasn't grief that had driven her into the military. It was control, precision, mastery over the uncontrollable. She had vowed that no target, no challenge, would ever intimidate her the way fear had claimed her father. "She's just a kid," one of the Marines said, glancing at her sideways. He didn't know the half of it. Alina wasn't a kid. She was a storm waiting to strike. A sudden gust of wind blew sand into her face, forcing her to blink rapidly. Her gloves scraped across the rifle's surface as she adjusted her aim. Her chest rose and fell slowly, measured, almost ritualistic. Time seemed to stretch in the desert heat. A drop of sweat slid down her temple, tickling her eye, but she ignored it. This was the moment, the impossible shot, the one everyone else had laughed at, claimed couldn't be done. Behind her, murmurs grew louder, more anxious. The instructors had come closer now, curious, worried. The colonel himself had appeared, his face tight with tension, scanning the range as if he could will the shot to happen or prevent it from occurring. Alina's finger hovered above the trigger. Her hand was steady. She could feel the tension coiling in her muscles, a spring ready to release at the perfect instant. She had spent years preparing for this, every sleepless night, every punishing drill, every failed shot she had taken alone in the desert or at the range. It had all led to this precise moment. The drone camera buzzed softly overhead, capturing the sweat, the grit, the absolute stillness of the scene. Every eye in the range was on her. She could feel it, the collective doubt, the underestimation, the sneering certainty of failure. And yet she was calm, not cocky, not reckless, calm, focused. Then, without warning, the wind shifted violently. A column of sand whipped across the target, threatening to conceal it completely. A Marine let out a nervous laugh, shaking his head. She's going to choke. Alina's mind cleared. Calculations, adjustments, one movement at a time. She slid the rifle into a perfect alignment, each component clicking into place like clockwork. Her breathing slowed, in and out, her pulse steadied. She had been here before in her mind countless times. Every possible failure had already been accounted for. She exhaled slowly, focusing entirely on the speck of metal far across the range. She visualized the shot, the arc, the wind, the bullet spinning in perfect rotation, cutting through the air. She saw it strike true, heard the metallic ring in her imagination. And then the real world came back, gritty and unforgiving. A voice broke the silence. "Captain Brooks, you sure about this?" It was Major Carter, her mentor, who had trained her since she first picked up a rifle. His eyes were wide, unreadable, the line between pride and fear blurred. She nodded once, barely perceptible, and he stepped back, leaving her to her moment. Every Marine held their breath. The colonel's jaw clenched. The drone hovered, recording every flicker of muscle, every inch of tension. And then the most terrifying sound of all, silence. The desert itself seemed to hold its breath. Alina tightened her grip. Her finger pressed gently against the trigger. And then, suddenly, a crack sounded from the far edge of the range. A warning shot fired into the sky. Dust erupted in a cloud nearby, blinding her for a moment. All eyes turned. All murmurs froze. The impossible had become dangerous. Her heart raced. The desert wind seemed louder now, harsher. The world narrowed to a single point, the tiny, impossibly distant metal target. Her finger hovered. 1 second, 1 heartbeat. She could stand down. She could obey. She could let the doubt win. But she didn't. She exhaled, eyes narrowing, mind clear. This was her moment. Everyone had said it couldn't be done. Everyone had doubted her. Everyone had underestimated the small, steady woman standing alone in the desert sun. And Alina Brooks was about to prove them all wrong. But as she pressed her cheek to the stock and began to calculate the final adjustments, the wind shifted again. Faster this time. A cloud of grit cut across the range, obscuring her view of the target entirely. Her heart skipped a beat. Would she still make the shot, or would the desert claim yet another impossible failure? The wind tore across the Nevada desert, rattling the drone above like a leaf in a storm. Dust cut across Alina's face, stinging her eyes, but she barely noticed. Her vision was locked on the target, yet her mind drifted backward, to memories she rarely allowed herself to touch. Memories that explained every twitch of muscle, every calculation of distance, every cold, unshakable determination. She was 10 when it happened. The autumn sun had glinted off the leaves of the hunting blind, painting everything golden. Her father, Sergeant Mark Brooks, had been her hero, strong, calm, precise. Every motion he made was deliberate, every word measured. He had promised her that day would be special, a simple hunt, father and daughter against the wilderness. Alina had clutched her tiny rifle, shaking with excitement, trying to mimic his steady posture. Then came the shot. Not from her rifle, not from her father. From a careless neighbor hunting nearby who had taken a reckless swing at a distant deer and instead shattered her world. The bullet struck her father, and in an instant the hero of her childhood collapsed. Alina's scream tore across the woods, wild and unheeded, as she ran to his side. The smell of gunpowder and blood mixed with the earthy scent of the forest, searing into her memory. The paramedics came, the neighbors apologized, but nothing could undo it. Her father was gone, just like that. And with him went her innocence, her unquestioning trust in the world, her belief that accidents were just accidents. That day, she swore she would never be powerless again. She would master the uncontrollable. She would control every bullet, every shot, every trajectory she ever laid her hands on. Now, over a decade later, standing at the edge of a desert range, she felt that same mix of grief and fire. The impossible shot was no longer about proving her skill. It was about proving that she could face chaos, wind, distance, doubt, and impose order. She could control what others could not. But even with all her training, doubts lingered like shadows she couldn't shake. Marines whispered behind her back, questioning her ability. "She's too small for this," one said. "She's too precise," another muttered, meaning it as an insult. No one understood that precision wasn't a weakness, it was survival. The instructors had given her a cold assessment. "This shot is beyond human skill," one had said bluntly, the words dripping with disbelief. "No one can make that shot." The comment had fueled her rage, yes, but more than that, it had sharpened her focus. It had reminded her that doubt existed not to paralyze, but to challenge. A flash of memory struck again, her first sniper course. Major Carter had been her mentor then, patient, relentless. He had trained her through heat, exhaustion, failure after failure. "Precision is control, Alina. Control is survival, but survival requires courage," he had said. Alina had nodded, soaking in the words, though her hands had trembled with doubt. She had failed at first, missing every target, humiliated, aching from every misstep. But Major Carter had never let her quit. Now she carried those lessons like armor. Her muscles were tight, her breathing slow, each calculation precise. The desert was a mirror of her childhood, unforgiving, merciless, relentless. Yet she stood unshaken. Each tiny adjustment of her scope, every shift in weight, every microsecond pause of her finger on the trigger was a dance she knew by heart. And yet the fear returned, insidious. Not fear of failure, she could handle that, but fear of consequence. The desert winds were unpredictable. One wrong variable could ruin everything, and the consequences weren't just humiliation. They could mean injury, court-martial, career-ending disaster. The thought of failure for something beyond her control gnawed at her, like the echo of that fatal bullet from her childhood. Major Carter's voice broke through her reverie. "Alina, focus. The wind is gusting. Remember your calculations. Remember your training." She exhaled, steadying herself. Her father's memory, her mentor's guidance, the countless hours of preparation all merged into a singular point of clarity. She would not be undone by fear. Not now. Not ever. Behind her, the Marines shifted nervously. Some whispered bets, some openly doubted. The colonel's face was taut with tension, a mix of worry and disbelief etched into every line. Cameras whirred as the drone hovered overhead, capturing her every motion, every subtle shift in posture. Every second was being recorded, every inch of history being made. A sudden flash of movement to her left startled her. A gust of sand blew across her eyes, and for a moment the target vanished behind the swirling dust. The world contracted to nothing but the rifle, her breath, and the rhythm of her heartbeat. 1, 2, 3. She measured the wind, adjusted the scope, recalculated the trajectory, and pressed the bolt forward. Her finger hovered over the trigger. The desert seemed to hold its breath with her. Time stretched, elongated by tension and anticipation. She could hear whispers, murmurs, the distant hum of the drone, but inside her everything was silent, absolute focus, absolute control. And then a voice, cutting through the wind and silence like a jagged blade. "Captain Brooks, stand down." The colonel's voice, sharp, commanding, almost desperate. Her heart skipped. She knew the orders: do not take the shot. The conditions were dangerous. The distance, the wind, the unpredictability, all warnings she knew by heart. Her mind raced. She could obey. She could stand down and let everyone walk away satisfied, unbroken. But something deeper, something primal stirred inside her. The memory of her father, the years of relentless training, the whispered doubt of every Marine watching. The impossible shot wasn't just a challenge. It was a declaration. She was not fragile. She would not be underestimated. Alina pressed her cheek harder against the stock, feeling the subtle vibrations of the rifle in her hands. She adjusted her breathing again, slowing it to match the rhythm of her calculations. Each fraction of a second mattered. Each slight movement of the wind mattered. The target, barely a glimmer of metal against the desert, seemed to call to her, defying her, daring her to fail. And then another gust, stronger this time. Sand tore across her field of vision, nearly blinding her. The target flickered, disappearing momentarily into the shifting haze. She could feel the doubt crawling up her spine, the fear of the unknown. But she did not move, did not falter, did not blink. Every lesson she had learned since that tragic day in the forest with her father came rushing back. Every drill, every calculation, every second of practice had prepared her for this. She had trained her entire life to be ready for one moment. One impossible, unforgiving, world-defying moment. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The world seemed to slow. The desert wind screamed, the drone buzzed, the Marines whispered. Everyone watched. Her breath hitched. One thought echoed through her mind: if I miss, I fail everything. If I hit, I prove everything. She exhaled. And that's when the wind shifted once more. A sudden, violent gust swept across the range, kicking up a wall of dust that threatened to obliterate the target entirely. Elena froze, calculations racing, adjustments flashing through her mind in milliseconds. The impossible had just become unpredictable. Her heart hammered. Could she still make it? Could she still prove them all wrong? The desert seemed to pause, waiting. The Marines froze, the drone hovered, the colonel's shouted warning echoed and faded. And in that split second, Elena realized something terrifying and exhilarating. This shot was no longer just about skill. It was about courage. And courage was all she had left. Her eyes narrowed on the speck of metal. Her finger tightened. Her breath slowed. She pressed forward, ready to take the shot that no one else believed was possible. And the desert waited. The desert seemed to hold its breath as the warning shot echoed across the range. Elena's heart raced, but her body remained statuesque, muscles locked in perfect tension. She felt the vibration of the rifle against her shoulder, the weight of the barrel, the familiar cold metal beneath her fingertips. Every instinct screamed at her, "Stop! Stand down! This is dangerous!" A sharp voice cut through the haze of wind and grit. "Captain Brooks, I said stand down." The colonel had arrived at a run, his boots kicking up clouds of sand as he strode toward her. His face was red with fury and worry, sweat running down his temples. Every line in his jaw spoke of disbelief. He was a man used to obedience, used to control. And here she was, calm as a statue, defying every command. "Elena, this is insane. That shot is too far, the wind is unpredictable, you will fail," he barked, voice cutting like a whip. The Marines around them flinched at the volume. Even the drone seemed to hesitate, caught between filming and retreating from the chaos. Elena didn't flinch, she didn't argue. Her eyes, dark and unyielding, remained locked on the distant metal plate. "I can make it," she said softly, almost to herself. The colonel stopped a few feet away, glaring at her, his chest heaving. "You can't. You've trained for years, but this is beyond human skill. One miscalculation and you—" He cut himself off, realizing the thought of failure hung like a sword over both of them. "Stand down, Captain, now." Behind her, the Marines shifted uneasily. Some muttered to each other, some openly questioned her judgment. The air was thick with tension, dust, and heat. Every eye in the range was on her. No one had ever seen a moment like this. A single soldier facing not just a target, but the entire doubt of a trained battalion. Elena exhaled slowly, allowing herself a heartbeat to assess the situation. Her mind raced through variables: the distance, the wind speed, the gusts, the sun glare. She had already calculated all of this a dozen times in her head, but the sudden intervention reminded her that humans were unpredictable too. Her colonel, authority, tradition, experience was standing directly in her path, and if she failed, he would bear witness to the consequences. But then she remembered something more important: her father, the accident, The reckless shooter who had ended everything she loved in an instant. That day had taught her something vital. No one would protect her from the impossible. No one would control the chaos for her. If she wanted to succeed, she had to take control herself. The colonel stepped closer, his voice rising. "You're not thinking. Stand down. The shot is impossible. You'll ruin your career, or worse, you could be injured." Alina shifted her stance slightly, keeping the rifle steady. Her eyes never left the target. "I've trained my entire life for this. I know the variables, I know the risks. I can do this." Her words were calm, almost chillingly serene. The colonel's jaw tightened. He leaned closer. "You will obey me, Captain. That is an order. Stand down." Her mind flashed back to the first day she met Major Carter. He had been patient but relentless, teaching her that courage didn't mean defiance. It meant precision under pressure. But what he hadn't told her, couldn't have told her, was that some moments required defiance itself. Some moments required breaking every rule to prove that skill and courage mattered more than hierarchy. Alina's finger hovered over the trigger. She could feel the colonel's presence behind her, the collective doubt of the Marines, the eyes of the drone camera, all watching, all waiting. A sudden gust of wind ripped across the range, kicking up a wave of sand that blurred the target. She squinted, recalculated, and adjusted her scope just slightly. Every microsecond mattered. The colonel's voice rose again, louder this time, desperate. "Captain, I don't care what your calculations say. Stand down." And in that moment, Alina realized the truth. The impossible wasn't just the shot itself. The impossible was choosing to take it when everything, everyone, and every rule screamed at her to stop. She inhaled deeply, feeling the desert heat burn in her lungs. She thought of her father's steady hands, the way he had taught her to control chaos, to impose order on the uncontrollable. She thought of Major Carter's guidance, of years of discipline and precision training. She thought of every Marine who had doubted her, and she thought of herself, every fear, every loss, every triumph that had led her to this moment. Her exhale was slow, deliberate. Her finger pressed gently against the trigger. The colonel froze, the Marines gasped, the wind howled like a beast. She could feel the tension radiating from the soil beneath her boots, from the drone hovering above, from every soldier holding their breath. And then, almost imperceptibly, the target shimmered against the heat waves of the desert. "Don't," the colonel muttered under his breath. But his words fell flat, powerless against the storm of determination that surged through Alina. Her finger began to squeeze the trigger. The world narrowed to the rifle, the scope, and the distant glint of metal. Every calculation, every tiny movement, every second of preparation merged into one singular focus. And then a sudden movement at the edge of her vision, a tumble of sand, a flash of metal. Someone had approached the range, someone unauthorized. Her pulse spiked. She shifted her aim slightly, recalibrating. The world felt smaller, tighter, more unforgiving. The colonel's orders, the Marines' whispers, the sheer impossibility of the shot, none of it mattered anymore. Everything depended on her. "Captain, don't!" the colonel shouted again, panic creeping into his voice. Alina didn't respond. She never did, not in moments like this. Moments like this required silence, focus, courage. She exhaled. She pressed her finger down. And then a second voice cut through the chaos. Major Carter, calm but urgent on her radio. "Alina, think. Is this the shot you can take? If you miss, it could be catastrophic." Alina's heart thudded. She froze for a heartbeat. The world seemed to tilt, stretched between fear and possibility. Every training, every memory, every calculation screamed at her, "Take the shot." She lowered her cheek to the stock again, sighting through the scope. Wind, distance, angle, gravity, all variables accounted for. Her finger hovered over the trigger. The colonel stepped closer, hand outstretched, a final attempt to halt her. His eyes were wide, almost pleading. "Alina, now stop." Her finger pressed. The desert held its breath. And in that frozen instant, as the wind tore across the sand, the Marines gasped, and the drone camera shivered in the gust, Alina realized the terrifying truth. This shot was no longer just about skill. It was about defiance, about courage, about proving that no one, not the colonel, not the Marines, not fate itself, could dictate what she could achieve. The trigger clicked, the mechanism locked. The desert screamed around her. Every heartbeat, every second, every inch of muscle control counted. She was about to take the impossible shot. And no one, not even the colonel, could stop her now. The desert roared around her, wind slicing like knives across the Nevada training range. Dust swirled in dizzying patterns, distorting the horizon, making the tiny metal target appear and disappear like a mirage. Alina Brooks' eyes never wavered. She knelt, rifle poised, her cheek pressed to the cold stock, every muscle taut with focus. The impossible shot was no longer a hypothetical. It was here, now, in the heart of this unforgiving landscape. Behind her, the colonel's face was a mask of disbelief, rage, and fear. His boots scuffed the sand as he took a cautious step closer, arms outstretched. "Captain, stop! Stand down!" His voice cracked under the desert wind, desperation seeping into every word. But Alina didn't flinch. She couldn't. She had trained for this her entire life. A gust of wind tore across the range, rattling the drone overhead, kicking sand into her eyes. She blinked, letting her tear ducts adjust to the grit. For a moment the world seemed to narrow to a single point, the tiny speck of metal 1,500 yards away. She could see the light glinting off it, dancing like a flame in the heat waves. That speck held everything: her father's memory, her years of preparation, every whispered doubt she had ever endured. She inhaled slowly. 1, 2, 3. Her fingers adjusted the scope, accounting for wind, gravity, temperature. Her mind ran through calculations she had performed 1,000 times. The crosswind, shifting unpredictably, could alter the bullet's path by inches, enough to miss entirely. But she had memorized its every nuance, the subtle patterns in the wind that others would overlook. Precision was her weapon. The colonel stepped closer, anger boiling over into panic. "Alina, if you do this, I'm taking responsibility, and you'll answer for every consequence." She didn't respond. Words wouldn't matter here. The shot wasn't about orders, obedience, or hierarchy. It was about control, about courage, about proving to herself and everyone who doubted her that the impossible could be conquered. A memory surfaced, the hunting trip she had taken with her father years ago, the autumn sunlight filtering through the leaves, the calm in his eyes as he lined up a shot. The precision, the control, the mastery. And then the sudden, heart-wrenching sound of a careless shot, stealing him from her forever. That memory had fueled her obsession with control, with perfection. It had shaped her into the soldier she had become. Her breathing slowed. Each exhale a ritual, a chant, a meditation. Her heart thudded in rhythm with the desert wind, yet her mind was crystalline, focused, razor-sharp. Every past failure, every doubt, every whisper of skepticism coalesced into a singular determination. Major Carter's voice crackled over the radio, calm but urgent. "Alina, are you ready? Remember, one misstep and it's over. You have to be sure." She nodded to herself. "I am," she whispered. She wasn't just ready, she was certain. Every variable accounted for, every calculation precise, every instinct primed. But the desert wasn't done testing her. Another gust tore through the range, stronger than before, whipping the sand into her face. Her vision flickered, obscuring the target. Her pulse quickened. Could she still do it? Could she still hit a target that now seemed to vanish and reappear with every gust? She adjusted the scope slightly, compensating for the wind and the mirage. Every microsecond counted. She could feel the rifle's pulse against her shoulder, the cold metal biting into her cheek, every muscle in her body coiled like a spring. The Marines behind her held their breath, frozen in disbelief. Some whispered nervously, some shook their heads. None could believe she would attempt it. The colonel's voice cut again, higher now, frantic. "Alina, stop, don't do this, stand down." She shook her head, the words falling on deaf ears. This was no longer a challenge of obedience. It was a test of mastery, of courage, of resolve. She had trained for years for moments like this, and no one, not even the colonel, could take it from her. Her finger hovered over the trigger. Every second stretched into eternity. The desert wind tore past her, the heat shimmered off the cracked earth, and the tiny metal plate danced on the horizon like a taunt. The impossible seemed within reach, yet just out of grasp. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, centering herself. Memories of her father, Major Carter's lessons, her years of discipline, all of it merged into a single purpose. She could fail, she could be ridiculed, she could face consequences for defying orders, but none of that mattered. In this moment there was only precision, only control, only courage. Opening her eyes, she adjusted the rifle again, tiny micro-adjustments for wind, distance, and elevation. The metal target, tiny and far away, seemed impossibly small, yet it was within her sight. Her pulse steadied. She exhaled slowly, the rhythm of her breath in perfect harmony with the desert around her. The Marines whispered among themselves, their voices barely audible over the wind. "She can't, she won't." Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Control what you can, accept what you can't, and never let fear decide for you." She exhaled again. Her finger pressed against the trigger. Every calculation, every lesson, every ounce of her being funneled into this one impossible shot. And then a sound from the ridge behind the target, a flicker of movement, shadows in the heat waves, someone observing her. Her pulse quickened. Could this be another Marine, or worse, an unknown observer testing the range, testing her? She didn't waver. The presence of another set of eyes didn't change her focus. It only heightened it. This wasn't just about hitting a target anymore. This was about proving mastery under pressure, control under chaos. The desert had thrown everything at her: wind, distance, skepticism, doubt, and she had endured. The colonel's hand trembled as he reached toward her, a final desperate attempt to stop her. "Elena, I'm telling you, stand down." She shook her head slightly, her eyes narrowing, her focus absolute. "No," she whispered, "not to the colonel, not to the wind, not to fear, to herself." Her finger began to squeeze the trigger, slowly, deliberately. The entire desert seemed to pause, holding its breath with her. The drone above tilted slightly in the wind, capturing every detail. The bead of sweat sliding down her temple, the dust dancing in the sunlight, the tension in every muscle of her body. Her vision narrowed to the tiny glint of the target. She felt the weight of the rifle, the pull of gravity, the spin of the bullet she had prepared to send. Every variable, every adjustment, every calculation aligned. She exhaled one final time. And then the desert shifted again. A violent gust threatened to knock the target from view entirely. Sand blasted across her face. Her finger wavered for a fraction of a second. Her heart thundered in her chest. Could she still do it? Could she still succeed when everything seemed stacked against her? The world contracted to nothing but her, the rifle, and the speck of metal on the horizon. She inhaled sharply, holding it, centering herself. The impossible was within reach, yet still terrifyingly fragile. And then the final moment, a decision she had made countless times in her mind but had never faced in reality. One movement, one squeeze, one single fraction of a second, that would decide everything. Her finger tightened. The desert waited. The Marines held their breath. The colonel's hand froze inches from her shoulder. Elena pressed forward. And in that instant, the impossible was about to become reality. The rifle bucked under her shoulder as Elena squeezed the trigger. The recoil jolted through her body, sharp and uncompromising, but her stance held steady. The desert wind tore at her, blasting sand across her cheeks and into her eyes. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Dust, wind, heat, the drone hovering overhead, the Marines staring, the colonel frozen in disbelief. Then came the sound, sharp, echoing, final. A single, thunderous report that seemed to split the air in two. Elena's body trembled with the aftershock, but her eyes remained locked through the scope, heart hammering against the cage of her ribs. The Marines gasped, some falling to their knees instinctively, shielding themselves from the gunfire. The colonel's face went white, jaw slack. His outstretched hand froze in midair as if the world had betrayed him. Elena exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. But she didn't relax entirely. The shot was only half the battle. The impossible was never about pulling the trigger. It was about what happened afterward. Through the shimmer of heat waves, the tiny speck of metal on the horizon danced, twisting and shifting with the gusts. Elena held her breath. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The entire desert seemed to watch with her. A second later the sound came, a sharp, clear, metallic ring that sliced through the chaos. The distant target plate had been struck dead center. Silence. Absolute stunned silence. Then came the realization her shot had worked. Against wind, distance, doubt, and disbelief, she had done the impossible. Elena lowered her rifle slowly, letting the adrenaline ebb, letting her eyes adjust to the stark desert light. The Marines erupted into a mixture of disbelief and celebration. Some shouted, some clapped, some ran toward her as if gravity itself had released its hold. The colonel's face was a storm of rage, shock, and begrudging respect. He shook his head, unable to speak. Major Carter's voice came through the radio, trembling with emotion. "Elena, you did it. I can't believe it. You actually did it." She allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible nod. But there was no time to bask in triumph. A movement flickered at the edge of the ridge behind the target, shadows shifting in the heat waves. Elena's heart jumped. Observers, or worse. The Marines turned, scanning the horizon. Whispers of confusion and fear passed between them. The colonel moved to block her view, yelling orders, but even he couldn't mask the fact that someone was out there, watching. Elena felt the old familiar surge of tension, sharper this time. The desert had tested her in every conceivable way: wind, distance, doubt, authority. And now it added another variable, the unknown. She squared her shoulders. Her father's memory, Major Carter's teachings, and every ounce of her life's training coalesced into focus. She was ready for whatever came next. "Captain Brooks," Major Carter's voice said softly through the radio, "stay alert. You might not be alone out there." Her eyes scanned the horizon, following the shadows moving across the ridge. Whoever or whatever was there, they had witnessed the shot. And that meant consequences far beyond the range, far beyond the desert, far beyond what anyone had anticipated. The colonel barked orders, trying to rally the Marines to regain control. "Form up, keep your eyes on the ridge, everyone hold positions." But even he knew the moment had shifted. The impossible shot had changed the rules of the game. Elena's pulse steadied again, slow and measured. The thrill of success mingled with a cold, creeping fear. The desert had proven her skill, now it was proving her courage. She was on her own. Her choices from this moment would define everything. A Marine stumbled toward her, eyes wide. "Captain, that shot, you did it. How?" She gave him a small, focused nod. "Focus. Watch, prepare, it's not over yet." The wind picked up again, sharper this time, tearing at the rifles and uniforms. The shadows on the ridge shifted, almost like deliberate signals. Elena's mind raced. Observers weren't supposed to be here. This was a controlled range, controlled conditions. Yet the desert had thrown everything at her and now introduced something completely unpredictable: human observation, perhaps with motives unknown. Her hand tightened on the rifle. She was trained for extreme precision, for impossible shots, for moments when the odds were stacked against her. But she hadn't trained for this. Potential enemies, witnesses, consequences beyond calculation. A sudden movement, too swift to be wind alone, caught her eye. Someone was descending the ridge, moving quickly but cautiously. They weren't carrying a weapon. They weren't approaching in hostility yet, but the intent was unmistakable. They had come for a reason, and that reason involved her shot. The colonel noticed it too, his voice sharp. "All units, get ready, don't let them approach." But Alina didn't flinch. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Control what you can, accept what you can't, and never let fear decide for you." She exhaled slowly, regaining control over her racing pulse. Her rifle was still in her hands, her eyes still pressed to the scope. Her calculations didn't end at the shot. They extended to the unknown variable now moving toward the range. Her senses sharpened. Every rustle of sand, every subtle shift of shadow, every glint of light off metal, all were data. All were variables she could work with. A Marine whispered from behind her, voice tight with awe, "Captain, what do we do?" She didn't answer. She had no orders from anyone now, not from the colonel, not from her mentor, not from the desert itself. Decisions were hers alone, and decisions in her world required courage. The figure on the ridge paused, silhouetted against the harsh sun, and raised their hand, not in threat but in acknowledgement. The impossible shot had caught attention far beyond the range. Someone or something had noticed. Alina's mind raced. Observation changed everything. Every calculation now included new possibilities, human reaction, potential consequences, strategic advantage. She couldn't relax. Success had a price. The colonel's voice rose again, sharp, panicked, incredulous. "Captain Brooks, step away from the rifle now." She shook her head slightly, eyes narrowing, fingers gripping the stock. The shot had proven her skill, but skill alone didn't guarantee safety. Observation introduced uncertainty, stakes higher than she had ever imagined. Her heart pounded. She had risked her career, her reputation, everything for one impossible shot, and she had succeeded. But the desert, relentless and unforgiving, reminded her that every victory brought consequences. From the ridge, the figure began to descend toward the range, deliberate, slow, cautious. Every Marine tensed. Weapons were raised. Orders were shouted. The impossible had become reality, and now the impossible included human unpredictability. Alina's pulse steadied. She had faced wind, distance, doubt, and authority. She had conquered them all. The last variable, the observer, was just another challenge, another test. She lifted her head slightly, scanning the ridge, every nerve alive, every calculation firing. The desert had given her the impossible shot. Now it demanded her vigilance, her courage, her clarity. The first footsteps hit the sand, echoed, approaching, a presence, an answer to the desert's question, "What now?" And Alina knew, with the thrill of triumph still surging in her veins, that the story had only just begun. The shot had been fired, the impossible had been achieved, but the consequences, the ripple, were already on the horizon. The desert held its breath. The Marines held theirs. And Alina Brooks prepared for the risk. The desert lay in uneasy silence, the kind that follows a storm. Alina lowered her rifle slowly, her muscles aching from the tension, her chest rising and falling in a measured rhythm. The impossible had been done. The target, 1,500 yards away, had been struck dead center. She could feel the satisfaction, but it was fleeting. There was no time for triumph, only awareness, calculation, anticipation. The Marines around her began to process what had just happened. Some were laughing in disbelief, others shaking their heads in awe. A few, wide-eyed, simply sank to the ground, staring at her as if she were a legend in motion. The colonel remained frozen, jaw tight, fists clenching and unclenching, torn between rage, fear, and grudging admiration. Then the figures on the ridge became more distinct. At first they had been shadows, black shapes wavered in the heat waves. Now, as the sunlight cut across the desert, their outlines were clear. 3 men, dressed in unmarked tactical gear, moving with deliberate caution. Their attention was entirely on Alina. Who are they?" one young private whispered, his voice tight with fear. Major Carter's voice came through the radio, calm but tense. "Do not engage. Observe. They may be international observers. Do not provoke them. Captain Brooks' eyes on them. Alina's pulse quickened. She had faced extreme conditions, impossible shots, and a colonel's fury, but nothing had prepared her for this. Her training kicked in automatically: awareness, distance, wind, angles, strategy. She scanned the ridge, noting their movements, the subtle signals they exchanged. These were not ordinary civilians. They were calculated, precise, and assessing her. Her mind raced. The implications were enormous. One shot had put her, the Marines, and the entire training range on their radar. Her success was no longer just a personal triumph. It was a display of capability that had drawn attention from beyond the U.S. military. The colonel barked orders, attempting to regain control of the situation. All units, keep positions, do not approach, eyes on the ridge. Alina's eyes never left the figures. She noted the weapons they carried: compact, advanced, unfamiliar, not standard U.S. issue. This was deliberate observation, testing response, analyzing skill, and the thought made her pulse race with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She remembered the warning from Major Carter: observation could change everything. Every movement, every decision, every calculated choice now carried consequences. She had proven herself with the impossible shot, but the world was watching, and not everyone watching had friendly intentions. Captain, Carter's voice said, steady but tinged with worry, "They're not attacking yet. That's a good sign. Maintain composure, keep your team controlled." Alina exhaled slowly, letting her adrenaline settle slightly. She felt the weight of every eye on her: the Marines, the colonel, the drone, and now the 3 observers on the ridge. She allowed herself a brief moment to reflect. The impossible shot was achieved. She had defied authority, weather, and doubt. But victory now carried a new burden: attention, consequences, responsibility. One of the Marines broke the silence. "Captain, what do we do?" Alina glanced at them, her eyes sharp, unwavering. "Observe, do not act, stay calm, let them make the first move." The 3 figures on the ridge shifted slightly, one raising a small device, perhaps a camera, perhaps a scanner, and began transmitting or recording. The implications were clear. Her skill, her precision, her impossible shot, all were being documented. The colonel's face was pale. "This is unprecedented," he muttered under his breath. He glanced at Alina, realization dawning. The impossible shot had become an international signal. Alina felt a chill. Her life, her career, her training, her reputation, everything she had built was now visible to entities she could not control. Yet she remained calm. The impossible had been achieved, yes, but control was still hers, and in her world, control was everything. She remembered her father's lessons: control what you can, accept what you can't. She had mastered the impossible shot. She could not master the observer's intentions, but she could control her reaction, her team, and the next steps. The drone above captured the entire scene. Alina, stoic and precise, standing against the desert heat, her rifle lowered but ready. The Marines frozen in awe and apprehension. The colonel torn between authority and admiration, and the figures on the ridge silent and calculating. A sudden gust of wind blew, sending a swirl of sand into the faces of the Marines. They flinched, instinctively shielding their eyes. Alina remained still, letting the storm pass, her gaze locked on the distant ridge. The observers did not retreat, did not react. They simply watched, noting every movement, every action. Her mind processed the implications quickly. This wasn't just about a sniper shot anymore. It was about intelligence, strategy, perception. Every nation, every military, every agency that could witness her feat would now know that one American sniper could hit a target others deemed impossible. And that knowledge, visible to the wrong people, could have enormous consequences. The colonel finally spoke, his voice taut with tension. "Captain, you realize what this means?" Alina didn't respond immediately. Her eyes remained on the ridge. She nodded slowly. "Yes, and I am prepared for it." Major Carter's voice came again, steady and reassuring. "Good, Stay calm, your training will carry you through this. The three observers began to retreat slowly, moving back up the ridge. Their purpose had been fulfilled. They had witnessed her shot, confirmed her skill, and documented it. Whether they reported it, used it, or shared it remained unknown. Alina lowered her rifle fully, exhaling the tension that had coiled in her muscles for hours. She felt the relief of victory, but also the weight of consequences yet unseen. The impossible shot had been made, but the ripple effects had just begun. The colonel approached cautiously, his face unreadable. "Captain Brooks," he said slowly, "I don't know whether to reprimand you, commend you, or all of the above." Alina met his gaze evenly, her own calm absolute. "Sir, the shot is done. The rest is beyond me." He shook his head, muttering under his breath, "Extraordinary and terrifying." The Marines around her began to relax slightly, though their awe remained palpable. They whispered among themselves, replaying the impossible shot in their minds, trying to process what they had witnessed. Some clapped her on the back. Others simply stared, wide-eyed, understanding that history had just been made in the most unlikely place, a desert training range in Nevada. Alina glanced back toward the ridge one last time. The figures had vanished into the heat waves, leaving only the faintest traces of their presence. Observation complete, judgment pending. She realized then that this moment, her triumph, the impossible shot, the attention it had garnered, was a turning point. Her life, her career, and the fate of her team were now intertwined with forces she could not yet see or predict. Major Carter's voice softened over the radio. "Alina, you've proven something incredible today, but be ready. This shot, it's bigger than we ever imagined." She nodded, silent, her thoughts racing. The desert was quiet again, but the storm of consequences had begun. The impossible had been achieved, but the price of success was only just beginning to reveal itself. The colonel finally spoke, voice low and serious. "Captain Brooks, I have no doubt you made the shot. But the people who watched, they aren't our allies. Prepare for whatever comes next." Alina's eyes met his, calm and unwavering. "I'm ready." And as the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, Alina Brooks understood the truth. The impossible shot had been made. She had proven her skill. She had defied authority, weather, and doubt. But now the world had noticed, and the risk she had taken would echo far beyond the Nevada desert. Somewhere in places she could not yet see, the impossible had become known. And consequences, like desert winds, travel far and fast. The desert had quieted since the impossible shot, but the tension lingered like a storm cloud on the horizon. Alina Brooks stood near her rifle, the heat still radiating from the sun-baked earth beneath her boots. The Marines around her were alert, whispering, exchanging glances that flickered between awe and fear. The colonel remained stiff, a living embodiment of controlled panic, struggling to reconcile the impossible shot with the new threat on the ridge. Alina's mind raced. The observers had vanished, but their presence lingered like a shadow over her achievement. She understood now. Her triumph had been witnessed, analyzed, documented. Someone, somewhere knew that she could accomplish what no one else dared even attempt, and that knowledge carried danger. "Captain," Major Carter's voice cut through her thoughts over the radio, calm but tense. "You need to move your team back. They're still exposed, and I have a feeling you're not done yet." Alina nodded, scanning the horizon. The desert stretched endlessly, beautiful yet unforgiving, sun glaring off the sand, heat waves dancing in waves of optical illusion. It was beautiful, it was dangerous, and it was exactly where she needed to be. The first sign of trouble came subtly, a flicker of movement on the edge of the ridge, a shadow among shadows. Alina froze, her pulse accelerated, her finger twitched near the trigger. Then she saw him. A man emerged from the heat waves, moving with a confidence that immediately set her instincts on alert. He wasn't part of the observers. He carried no standard gear. Yet his presence radiated a dangerous familiarity, a history that tugged at a corner of her mind she had long tried to bury. Her breath caught. The man stepped closer, shielding his eyes from the sun, his face slowly coming into focus. "Alina Brooks," he said, voice low, calm, but with an edge that sent shivers down her spine. Alina's heart stopped. Recognition hit her like a freight train. This was the man, the reckless shooter from her father's past, the one responsible for the accident that had changed her life forever, the one whose bullet had stolen her father, stolen her innocence, and shaped the entire trajectory of her existence. He smiled, a slow, calculated smile that made the hair on the back of her neck rise. "I've been following your career, Captain," he said, almost casually. "And I have to admit, I didn't expect you to actually make it. The impossible shot." Alina's hands tightened on her rifle. Every instinct screamed at her to react, to fire, to strike before he could. But the Marines were around her, and a single misstep could escalate everything. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She simply measured him, calculated the threat. "You," she whispered, voice low and trembling with anger, "you're here, after all these years." He shrugged almost dismissively. "I'm everywhere, Alina, always observing, and now I see you've learned something I never thought possible. You've turned your tragedy into power." Her mind raced. He had tracked her, observed her impossible shot. This wasn't coincidence. This was deliberate, and it meant he had intentions, dangerous intentions. The colonel's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, breaking through the tension. "Everyone stay calm. Do not engage unless fired upon. Captain Brooks, assess and report." Alina's jaw tightened. She didn't need to report, she needed to act. But action required control, precision, patience, traits she had honed since that fatal day in the forest with her father. She didn't react out of emotion. She reacted with strategy. The man took another step closer, eyes locked on hers. "You made the impossible shot," he said again. "But it was never about the shot itself. It's about who watches, who notices, and who understands the consequences." Alina's pulse surged. He had been watching the observers, he knew, and he had chosen this moment to confront her. The Marines whispered among themselves, unease creeping into their movements. The colonel's face was pale, realizing the implications. This man, a shadow from Alina's past, had now intersected with the present in a way no one could predict. Alina's thoughts raced. Years of training, years of discipline, every moment of preparation, it all came down to this. The impossible shot had proven her skill, but now, skill alone wouldn't be enough. She had to anticipate, adapt, and survive. The man smiled again, almost casually, and then shifted slightly as if to reveal something. A flash of metal caught the sunlight, a device, unfamiliar, clearly sophisticated. Observation, documentation, measurement. He had come to witness, to assess, to ensure that her capabilities were understood, cataloged, and perhaps exploited. Alina's eyes narrowed. Every lesson, every calculation, every memory of her father's loss guided her next move. She had trained for impossible odds, for precision under pressure, for control when chaos threatened. This was no different, only higher stakes, sharper consequences. The colonel barked again, voice cracking. "Captain, identify threat. What is he doing?" Alina's voice was calm, low, lethal in its focus. "He's here to watch, to test, to see what I can do, but he underestimated one thing. I am ready for him." The man's smile widened. "Indeed, you are," he said. "And that's why I'm here, to see what you've become, to see if you can survive more than just a target, if you can survive the consequences of your actions." The wind shifted again, harsh and unforgiving. Sand kicked across the desert floor, stinging faces, obscuring vision. The Marines adjusted positions, wary of both the man and the changing conditions. The colonel's orders became frantic, chaotic. Alina, however, was still calm. Her mind ran through scenarios, calculations, possibilities. She could feel the weight of the rifle, the recoil it would produce, the stability required to act if necessary. She could see the ridge, the shadows, the devices, and she could predict, almost instinctively, the next few moves the man might make. He stepped closer deliberately, a slow, controlled approach. "You made the shot," he said softly. "You've proven skill, precision, courage, but can you handle me?" Alina exhaled slowly, centering herself. She had faced wind, authority, distance, impossible calculations. She had faced doubt, fear, and personal loss. And now she faced the man who had shaped her entire life, the one whose recklessness had stolen everything she loved. Her gaze hardened. "I've handled everything the world has thrown at me," she said. "I'm not afraid of you." He laughed softly, a sound that carried both amusement and respect. "Good, that's what I wanted to see, but remember, the impossible shot is nothing without what comes after, and after comes risk. Do you understand?" Alina's pulse surged, adrenaline mixing with the residue of triumph and fear. She understood. Every action had consequences. Every choice had stakes higher than she could measure. And this man, her father's nemesis, was now the embodiment of those stakes. The desert sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the sand, elongating the tension, the stakes, the confrontation. Every marine, every observer, every calculation now revolved around this singular, volatile moment. And in that silence, Alina Brooks made a choice. She would not let history repeat itself. She would not allow fear, doubt, or recklessness to control her. She had survived the impossible shot. Now she would survive the impossible challenge. She lifted her rifle slightly, finger hovering, eyes locked on the man from her past, heart steady, mind precise. The desert wind roared around her, carrying the weight of memory, of consequence, of destiny itself. The man stopped, his expression unreadable, but his eyes betrayed a glimmer of respect, and perhaps recognition of the challenge he had created. Alina exhaled slowly, her resolve crystallized. She had faced death, doubt, and impossibility before. She would face this as well. And in that charged moment, the desert seemed to hold its breath once more. The impossible had been achieved. But the confrontation and the true test had only just begun. The desert was a furnace, the sun hanging low in the sky, casting long shadows across the sand. Alina Brooks stood poised, rifle in hand, eyes locked on the man who had haunted her life since childhood. He had been the reckless shooter who stole her father, the catalyst that forged her into the soldier she had become. And now he had returned not as a threat alone, but as the ultimate measure of her courage, skill, and resolve. The Marines formed a perimeter, tense, uneasy. Their voices whispered, muttered. The colonel's face was pale, lips pressed into a tight line, disbelief and worry etched into every line. Even the drone hovering above seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, the silence almost sacred in its stillness. The man from the ridge took another deliberate step forward, unarmed, calm, but with a confidence that sent a chill down Alina's spine. His eyes, sharp and calculating, betrayed a strange mixture of respect and menace. "Alina," he said, voice low, deliberate, "you've proven something extraordinary. That shot, it's legendary. But skill alone doesn't protect you from consequences. Do you understand that?" Alina exhaled slowly. Her pulse throbbed in rhythm with the desert wind. Every fiber of her being was focused, her body a coiled spring of tension and readiness. She had trained for decades for impossible precision. She had faced doubt, fear, authority, the elements, and now this, a reckoning from the past itself. She nodded slightly. "I understand," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, unwavering. He smiled, faint, tight, knowing. "Good, then let's see how far your courage reaches." Without warning, he turned slightly, signaling toward the ridge behind him. From the heat waves, additional figures emerged, more observers, some in tactical gear, some carrying devices Alina didn't recognize. The impossible shot had attracted attention beyond imagination. She realized in that moment that her feat had become a statement, one that had been observed, analyzed, and documented by those who could exploit it. The colonel barked orders, but his voice was almost drowned in the storm of tension that had settled over the range. "All units, stay alert. Do not engage unless fired upon. Alina's eyes narrowed. Observation alone wasn't a threat yet, but the implications were immense. Whoever these people were, they had come to assess, to measure, perhaps even to recruit or challenge her, and she had only moments to decide how to respond. Her training kicked in. She scanned the desert, the ridge, every movement, every shadow. The Marines were tense, unsure, looking to her for guidance. She didn't hesitate. Her mind calculated variables: wind, distance, human movement, potential outcomes. Every possible scenario flickered through her mind. Then he spoke again, voice calm but carrying weight. You've proven precision. You've proven courage. But can you act under pressure? Can you handle more than a target? Can you survive the consequences of your actions? Alina's pulse quickened, but her hands were steady. Her rifle remained trained, her gaze unwavering. She had faced impossible odds before: the crosswinds, the extreme distance, the doubt of her superiors, and she had prevailed. This was no different, only more personal, more immediate. The Marines shifted uneasily, glancing between Alina and the man who had caused her so much pain. Their whispering carried through the wind, a mix of awe, fear, and uncertainty. Alina took a slow step forward, bringing herself fully into the open, rifle lowered but ready. I've faced more than anyone should, she said, voice strong, carrying across the desert. I've survived what seemed impossible, and I'll survive this. You will not intimidate me. The man tilted his head slightly, a smirk playing at his lips. Impressive, but the impossible doesn't end with a shot. It ends with consequences. Let's see how you handle this one. From the ridge, a figure began descending rapidly, moving with purpose. The Marines tensed, readying their weapons, but Alina held up a hand. This was no immediate threat, she could sense it. It was deliberate, calculated, a test. Her mind raced. Years of training, every lesson from her father and Major Carter, every experience had led to this moment. She understood the stakes. Precision, patience, courage, all were required. She had proven herself once. Now she had to prove she could handle the aftermath. The man approached closer, stopping just out of rifle range. I underestimated you once, he said quietly, but you've learned well. The shot was perfect, and now the world has noticed. The real test is survival, of reputation, of skill, of consequences. Alina's eyes narrowed. I don't fear consequences, she said. I've lived them. He chuckled softly, almost approvingly. Good, that's exactly what I wanted to see. For a moment the desert seemed to pause. Wind died down, dust settled, silence stretched across the horizon. The Marines held their positions, frozen, watching, unsure of what would happen next. The colonel's face was taut, jaw tight, disbelief and fear mingling with respect. Then the man did something unexpected. He reached into his jacket and held up a folder, flipping it open. Inside were photographs, snapshots of her training, her previous missions, her impossible shots. Every detail had been meticulously recorded. He held them out, not threateningly, but deliberately, as if testing her reaction. Alina's pulse raced. This was more than observation. This was analysis, measurement, preparation for decisions she didn't yet know. The man's eyes met hers. You've proven skill beyond measure, Captain, but skill alone doesn't define you. Courage, resilience, intelligence, these are what matter. You've survived more than anyone imagined. And now, you have a choice. Her mind whirred, assessing every variable: choice, risk, survival, reward, consequence. She realized the truth. The impossible shot had not only proven her skill, it had put her on a path she could not have predicted. A path that demanded courage beyond calculation, action beyond training. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. Her voice was calm, resolute. I've made impossible shots before. I've faced impossible odds before, and I will continue to face them. I am ready. The man nodded slowly, a faint smile on his lips. Good, that's all I needed to see. You've proven yourself. You've honored your father, your training, and your skill. The world has noticed. and now you're ready for what comes next." With that, he turned, signaling to the observers behind him. They began to retreat, moving back up the ridge, disappearing into the heat waves. The Marines remained tense, unsure whether the danger had passed. Alina lowered her rifle fully, exhaling. Her heart still pounded, adrenaline surging, but a sense of calm settled over her. She had faced impossible wind, impossible distance, impossible doubt. She had faced authority, skepticism, and now the shadow of her father's past, and she had prevailed. Major Carter's voice crackled over the radio. "Alina, you did it. Every part of this, you handled it perfectly. The impossible shot, the confrontation, you've proven skill, courage, and resilience beyond measure." The colonel approached slowly, face taut but respect clear in his eyes. "Captain Brooks, I don't know whether to reprimand you, commend you, or both, but you've changed the game today. The world has noticed." Alina nodded slightly, a small, exhausted smile crossing her face. "The shot is done. The rest is preparation for what comes next." As the desert sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows and turning the sky into a canvas of fire, Alina Brooks understood the truth. The impossible shot had been made. She had defied authority, weathered doubt and her own fears. She had proven herself. And now she had survived the consequences, faced the challenge from her past, and emerged stronger, ready for whatever the world would throw at her next. The desert winds whispered around her, carrying dust, heat, and the lingering echo of the impossible. She had made history, and nothing would ever be the same. Alina Brooks smiled faintly, knowing one truth above all: some shots are impossible until you decide they are. And for her, the impossible would always be just another challenge to conquer.